Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? I thought not. It's not a story the Jedi would tell you. It's a Sith legend. Darth Plagueis was a Dark Lord of the Sith, so powerful and so wise he could use the Force to influence the midichlorians to create life. He had such a knowledge of the dark side that he could even keep the ones he cared about from dying. The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. He became so powerful, the only thing he was afraid of was losing his power, which eventually, of course, he did. Unfortunately, he taught his apprentice everything he knew, then his apprentice killed him in his sleep. It's ironic he could save others from death, but not himself. This video will cover that fateful tale, the story written by James Luceno diving into the life of one of the greatest Sith Masters to have ever lived. For Darth Plagueis sought to conquer death itself, and saw himself as the culmination of the Sith grand plan, the climax and end of Darth Bane's rule of two. But pride and hubris would be his downfall, and this is his story. A dark, hooded figure stands at the epicenter of a powerful earthquake. It is not the moon Darth Plagueis, but instead his former apprentice, Sheev Palpatine, or better known as Darth Sidious. Yellow eyes lifted to the night sky, he saw the trembling stars flare, and in the depth of his being, he felt the power of the dark side anoint him. For Sidious has just killed his master, claiming supremacy over the Sith. Now, the Force swells within him, rushing him with power as he stands by the unmoving body of Plagueis. However, Sidious is uneasy, and confirms his master's death with the Force. The irony of Plagueis' demise hits Sidious, and he turns his thoughts to the future. With his ascension, he knows the galaxy is irrevocably shifted, and Sidious now opens himself up fully to the dark side, letting the monster within him run wild throughout his body, breathless with his new power. On the planet of Baldemnik, two Sith Lords stand in a crystal cave, prospecting for its Cortosis deposits. Darth Plagueis and his master Darth Tenebrous are the two reigning Sith of the Rule of Two, an ancient doctrine formed by Darth Bane. They pose as prospectors and business moguls, carrying out the machinations of the dark side and the grand plan in secret from the Republic and Jedi Order. Presently, they monitor a probe drilling towards a deposit, but a pocket of lethal combustible gas is detected. Tenebrous notes his sources did not inform him of the gas, and the probe suddenly begins to ignore orders, continuing to drill despite commands to halt operations. Tenebrous quickly turns to run to their ship, his discomfort, and almost fear, taking Plagueis off guard, for he wonders what danger was foreseen by his master. The two Sith make it back to their ship in a grotto, underneath a domed ceiling. But then the gas explosion erupts, shaking the tunnel walls and sending a searing fireball at Tenebrous, who manages to contain it with the Force. Plagueis turns to see slabs of rock falling towards their ship as the ceiling begins to crack. He sees Tenebrous distracted, conveniently underneath the falling ceiling, and realizes his master had foreseen his death earlier. Plagueis seizes his opportunity, seizing several slabs of rock above his master and slamming them down with blinding speed. The starship is crushed, but Tenebrous is mortally wounded, his lung punctured. Plagueis approaches a dying Tenebrous, who urges him to investigate Subtext Mining, the corporation that sold them the faulty probe. The Bith then realizes what Plagueis did, and applauds his deceit despite the ship being destroyed, which inadvertently risks the future of the Sith. Plagueis then breaks Tenebrous' neck, and sits back to observe his master's dying midichlorians. He has been privately researching the mysterious organelles, finding them to be fascinating translators of the will of the Force, rather than simple Force-carrying particles. However, to further his designs, Plagueis must now somehow find a way off Baldemnik and deal with the wounds he suffered during the cave-in. He lifts several stones off the ship and retrieves his lightsaber and supplies, confident nothing will be traced back to him. It will merely appear that Darth Tenebris, known as Rujas Gnome to the greater galaxy, was a simple ship designer who died in an unfortunate mining accident. Plagueis makes his way to the surface and begins trekking to the nearest spaceport, looking to return to his homeworld of Munilist, where he is known as Higo Damask, one of many wealthy moons involved in business and politics in the galaxy. He also senses a lingering dark presence in the Force, and wonders whether it is the last influences of Tenebris or a potential challenger he does not know about yet. At last arriving at the spaceport, Plagueis chooses to hide in the ship Woebegone, where once in space he will reveal himself to the crew and its captain, Elin Law. The ship takes off, with Plagueis eventually being discovered as a stowaway in one of the cargo bays. Speaking privately with Law, he politely asks for passage to Munilist, but does not tell her his name of Higo Damask, or the purpose of his journey. However, the crew does not trust Plagueis, and they decide to turn the ship back around to Baldemnik and detain him. Feeling he has no other option, Plagueis kills the entire crew, moving like lightning. He employs the services of a medical droid, 114D, and they fly to Munilist. There, Plagueis is a social elite, known as Higo Damask, CEO of Damask Holdings. Larsh Hill, his COO, greets him upon landing, for business must still carry on as usual. Plagueis has been using his political influence to quietly push for the creation of free trade zones in the Outer Rim, and learns that the Trade Federation has been recently granted full voting rights in the Senate. He tells Hill of Rujas Gnome's death, and gives orders to purchase land on Baldemnik through investors that can't be traced back to them. Plagueis must also now prepare for an important political meeting with several business corporations and crime lords, including the Hutts and Subtext Mining. He then shows 114D to his island compound of Abora, where Plagueis conducts his studies on the midichlorians of living organisms. The droid is also instructed to study the histories of the Sith, and is told the goal of all the research is to extend Plagueis' life indefinitely. He has already learned much over the years. Midichlorians seem to be organism-specific, and will not enhance another's force abilities if simply transferred over. It is already established that weaker-minded individuals are subject to force manipulations, which may explain why it is easier to heal someone else rather than oneself. Plagueis has come to believe that extending his life will involve figuring out how to induce midichlorians to serve the physical needs of the body and subdivide at will. Supposedly, the ancient Sith Lords of old like Naga Sadow and Exar Kun had been able to do this, but Plagueis was unsure if that was a matter of raw power or simply because the dark side was stronger back then. Essence transfer, another lost technique, did not amount to physical survival, for Plagueis would settle for nothing less than everlasting life. He believes this will be the fruit of the Sith Imperative, the reward of the work of many generations of Dark Lords. 100 years earlier, Tenebris' Twi'lek master had opened a small rent in the fabric of the Force, allowing the dark side to be felt by the Jedi for the first time in more than 800 years. That had been the inauguration, the commencement of the revenge of the Sith. The time comes for the meeting on Sojourn, a nearby moon. A traditionally annual gathering, it summons the most important and powerful economic players in the galaxy, but Plagueis has been able to transform it into something else entirely: social alchemy. The resources of his family clan, which lie solely in his possession, have grown substantially, and his quiet influence echoes loudly across the Republic. Plagueis talks with Gardula Basadi, the elder of the Hutt clan, who asks for his support in her takeover of Tatooine. In exchange for his funds to help her feud against the Desilijik clan, she offers a partnership in a proposed pod racing circuit, one that will attract gamblers from far and wide. Plagueis then counters and asks that Boss Cabra of the Black Sun be allowed to operate freely on Nar Shaddaa, which Gardula agrees to. A reptilian Yinchori contingent then enters, disgruntled that their ancient homeworld has been long denied a seat in the Republic Senate. Plagueis attempts to force persuade them to drop the issue, but is surprised to find the species is force resistant. He turns face and says he will help their efforts in exchange for a personal favor. Senator Pack's team, representing the Grand Protectorate, then approaches Plagueis, unhappy with Gardula's new agreement regarding Tatooine. It would compete with his own pod racing business on Malastare, and team also disapproves of Plagueis' favoritism towards the Trade Federation. Team is temporarily appeased by Plagueis by assuring him they will raise the cost of Malastare's fuel exports. Plagueis then moves to confront the subtext mining representatives. He and Hill intimidate and threaten them, getting a confession that they were hired for the mining survey by a political faction on Naboo that opposes the monarchy there. Additionally, there is apparently a large plasma vein on the planet as well. Plagueis spares their lives, and orders they be transported to the Tingle arm until he has further need for them. The meeting continues, with Plagueis furthering his goals of isolating the core Republic senators from the developments in the rest of the galaxy. Later that night, alarms go off across his complex. Security alerts him of an intruder in the surrounding forest, and Plagueis ventures out to investigate himself. He encounters another Bith, who knows his identity as Darth Plagueis and introduces himself as Darth Venomous. He was trained by Tenebris and sees Plagueis as an imposter, but is unaware of Tenebris' death. The two Sith begin to duel, and are initially evenly matched. However, Plagueis eventually gains the upper hand and forces Venomous to yield. He spares his life, but Venomous will now become a part of Plagueis' test subjects. Plagueis soon discovers from data logs on Venomous' ship that his Challenger was scouting potential apprentices. He has come to realize that Tenebris had several contingencies planned in the event of Plagueis' failure as an apprentice. For while Tenebris had believed the galaxy's fall to the dark side was predicted, the ascendancy could not be rushed by the Sith. Plagueis still advocated for the slow decimation of the Jedi Order, but agreed with his former master that Bane's rule of two had finally come to its end. The time had come for him to rule, not prepare the imperative further for a future Sith. Plagueis' own past can be traced back to when his father became the administrator of Maigito, where Higo was born to a non-primary wife. Higo grew up on the icy world, and learned from a young age he was able to manipulate and control his playmates, acting more as a puppeteer. Plagueis even coerced one child who particularly displeased him to jump out a window to their death. He told only his parents of the true story and his abilities, and began to shadow his father more and learned how those powers could be applied to business dealings. Jedi would come to visit from time to time, but Plagueis never felt a connection to them, and even grew to hate them for reasons he couldn't explain. However, one Rujas Gnome soon began to visit, and Plagueis soon sensed that their powers were similar. Higo Damask was given over to Gnome, who he would come to know as Darth Tenebris. He learned that his mother was a disciple of Tenebris, though not a full apprentice, tasked with seducing Plagueis' father to produce offspring powerful in the Force. In exchange, Plagueis' father was moved into an elite position in the intergalactic banking clan. Thus, Plagueis entered into apprenticeship under Tenebris, and the two Sith quietly traversed the galaxy, sowing discord and anarchy wherever they could in order to undermine the authority of the Republic and its Jedi. Now the task fell to Plagueis to eliminate potential apprentices of Venomous, for there was a slim risk of them attacking him. The first candidate is traced to a casino in the Tyon cluster. There, Plagueis and 114D meet with a casino manager, who is currently investigating an unusually large payout. A Kubaz soon wins under unusual circumstances, and in his next game, Plagueis detects the alien using the Force to cheat. The Kubaz, however, senses him and flees. Plagueis asks for a database of recent big winners in casinos in the region, and though none of the faces match, he comes to believe they may all actually be the same being, a shapeshifter. Plagueis and 114D then track the shapeshifter and ambush him in a tunnel. They learn he has been transferring his winnings to Karad Santhi II, the owner of CNR Technologies, who is apparently deep in debt to the Black Sun Vigos. Plagueis lets him go, telling him to go into hiding with his winnings and to never show his face again. The second candidate is an Iktachi priestess on Salukami. Plagueis arrives as she begins speaking to a large crowd, who look upon her with a cult-like reverie. She foretells a future of darkness for the galaxy. On the horizon looms a galaxy-spanning war, a conflict between machines of alloy and machines of flesh. Plagueis deems her message to be dangerous and approaches the priestess, grabbing her hands. He calmly electrocutes her to death with force lightning, then backs away, making it seem like she fainted. The third and final candidate is not Lair, who is somewhere on the world of Bedlam. He is apparently detained in an institution for the criminally insane, but upon arriving, Plagueis learns Lair has disappeared. Additionally, the Jedi have been contacted to help find him. Plagueis and 114D then track Lair to the planet of Abraxan, where there are rumors of a killing spree plaguing a Barabel settlement. They also meet the Jedi hunting Lair there as well, Master Ni Kada and Padawan Lo Book. Later that night, Plagueis hides in a marsh and draws Lair out by revealing himself in the Force. To eliminate Nair, who is volatile and dangerous, he orders him to attack the Jedi, who kill him. Sometime later, the executive officers of Damask Holdings meet with Ars Varuna, a representative to Bon Tapalo, who is projected to become the next monarch of Naboo. Plagueis hopes that his company can one day establish a base of operations on the planet, and also begins to consider starting the search for his own Sith apprentice. They have also come to a loose agreement to support Varuna in the election in exchange for rights to the plasma reservoir. The party still contends with a political faction of Naboo that is wary of opening the planet up to galactic trade. Additionally, Plagueis learns of a hidden source within the opposition that lead counter-allegations against that party, seemingly supporting Varuna. The source is the son of a noble family on Naboo, that of House Palpatine. Plagueis sees an opportunity to gain more information and asks to meet with the son personally, who simply goes by Palpatine. Weeks later, Plagueis and Larsh Hill meet with Varuna and T'Polo on Naboo to confirm the agreement regarding the plasma. He later journeys to a university and finds Palpatine himself. Plagueis coerces the young human to give him a tour of the university and learns his political mentor is Vidar Kim, the likely next senator of Naboo. Palpatine is surprised to learn that his role as the mole has been exposed, and also confides to Plagueis he disagrees with his father on the political situation regarding the monarchy. Plagueis listens as Palpatine wishes for Naboo to become part of the larger galaxy, and begins to sense conflict and the desire to do great things in the young man's mind. He is able to enlist Palpatine to report his father's political dealings to him directly. Plagueis, already well aware of Palpatine's rocky family relations, begins to manipulate and exploit his emotions. He deems Palpatine to be an exceptional candidate for an apprentice, as he has already displayed astute political cunning and ruthlessness. Here was a youth who had already risen above common morality and judged himself unique enough to create an individual code of ethics. Plagueis fully gains the trust of Palpatine, who goes on youthful tangents on the galaxy and his own house, needing strong, forceful leadership to solve problems and ascend in power. Plagueis comes to believe that Palpatine, a human of unique skills and talents, could be the final political manifestation the Sith need to finally triumph. All that remains is to assess Palpatine's strength in the Force. 2 days later, Plagueis visits Pax's team and his pod races on Malastare. Team knows of Plagueis' dealings on Naboo, and reveals his source came from within subtext mining. The deal with the plasma reservoir will greatly undermine Team's fuel exports, and he now feels shunned and disrespected by Plagueis. The Grand Protectorate becomes enemies with the Trade Federation, and Plagueis orders Larsh Hill to execute the maroon subtext mining representatives they had been holding in the Tingle arm. Plagueis then meets with the Patriarch of House Palpatine, Konsinga, who reaffirms his hard stance against Apollo coming to power. He tells Plagueis to stay away from his son, even subtly threatening his life. Later, Plagueis speaks with Palpatine again, who becomes furious upon hearing of his father's intervention in his personal life. His rage buffets Plagueis, who is astonished at the raw strength he witnesses. Had this human truly been born of flesh and blood parents, when, in fact, he seemed sprung from nature itself? Was the Force so strong in him that it had concealed itself? He urges Palpatine to pursue a means of emancipation from his family, and the young man finally reveals he desires to rule, to be a force for change. Plagueis then knows he is the right choice to be his apprentice, a human to don the mask of power while Plagueis controls everything from the shadows. While still not yet revealing his true identity as a Sith, he offers to help Palpatine in his quest for power. He tells Palpatine a story of part lie, part truth, in which he poisoned his spiteful siblings in order to gain sole possession of his father's ownings. Later, Palpatine is taken by a guard to his family ship. He is well aware Plagueis is using him for information, and is confronted by his father. Palpatine learns he will be sent away from Naboo to live with a different family, and a venomous argument breaks out. I knew this day would come. I've known it from the first moment I tried to swaddle you, and you fought me with a strength that was too powerful for your size or age. I was born mature, Father, fully grown, and you hated me for it, because you grasped that I was everything you can never be. Sinking into rage, Palpatine channels the Force and kills his entire family and their guards on the ship as it flies through hyperspace. He hails Plagueis, who suddenly senses an intense current of dark side energy. Plagueis learns of the killings and tells Palpatine he will cover everything up and meet with him soon. A week later, they reunite, where Plagueis confesses to goading Palpatine to estrange himself from his family. Palpatine himself has been deemed innocent, with Plagueis' agents removing any incriminating evidence from the ship. The full might of Palpatine's power washes over Plagueis, who marvels at what a tremendous ally he could become. Plagueis finally reveals his identity as a Sith to Palpatine, and asks him if he wishes to join the Order. It is my will to join my destiny forever with the Order of the Sith Lords. Then it is done. From this day forward, the truth of you, now and forevermore, will be Sidious. And so the rule of two comes to what may be its final pairing: Darth Plagueis the Master, and the apprentice Darth Sidious. Sidious's training begins in earnest, and he is forced to recount the killing of his family over and over to Plagueis, who hopes to remove any apprehension or emotion Palpatine may have towards the incident. By inciting a subtle hatred of Plagueis himself in the early stages of training, Plagueis also hopes Sidious will open himself up more to the dark side, and that Bane's rule of two will at last come to its end. Additionally, he reveals that a fallen Jedi, one who began their studies in the light side of the Force, can never truly become a Sith. Their attempts to convince themselves that they fell to the dark side, or that the dark side compelled their actions, are nothing more than pitiful rationalizations. That is why the Sith embraced the dark from the start, focusing on the acquisition of power. We make no excuses. The actions of a Sith begin from the self and flow outward. We stalk the Force like hunters, rather than surrender like prey to its enigmatic whims. So appease me, Sidious. Tell me again how you killed them. The training of Darth Sidious has continued for more than a decade. Plagueis teaches Sidious that the ancient Celestials in Rakata always knew the dark side, also known as Bogon, preceded the light, or Ashla. The lives of most beings are of small consequence. The Jedi have failed to understand this. They are so busy saving lives and striving to keep the powers of the Force in balance that they have lost sight of the fact that sentient life is meant to evolve, not simply languish in contented stasis. It is the purpose of the Sith to burn across the galaxy, strengthened by purpose to twist it to their own designs. According to Plagueis, they must become vessels of the dark side itself, and powers such as true Force lightning require a deep thirst for such strength. The Force itself must be broken and made to answer to a Sith's will, but will inevitably strike back against the user. This will invoke a physical transformation in the Sith Lord. The power of the dark side is an illness no true Sith would wish to be cured of. Sidious's training also includes lightsaber practice against battle droids, and he asks Plagueis why they continuously visit remote worlds rather than fabled planets such as Dromon Kaz and Korriban. Plagueis says instead they must focus on fulfilling Bane's doctrine and rooting out Sith pretenders, for although many things can be learned from ancient knowledge and holocrons, those things will be uniquely specific to the Sith who constructed them. Sidious must instead fashion his own perfection of the dark side. Plagueis argues that the Sith are needed to purge the galaxy from its current state of decay, brought on by the complacency of the Republic and Jedi. To facilitate this, they must adopt masses of quietly efficient politicians who drive change, while facilitating disorder and anarchy in the current institutions wherever they can. Sidious is 28 years old now, and has risen to the ambassador of Naboo. His childhood mentor Vidar Kim is now also the planet's senator. In the political theater, he makes sure to keep an eye out for potential co-conspirators and being strong in the Force not yet claimed by the Jedi. Pack's team also still works in the government, spiteful towards Plagueis for inciting the economic downturn of Malastare after the plasma deal. The agreement itself is still contentious among elite Nabooans, and Senator Kim remains distrustful of the Trade Federation's intentions. Concern begins to grow over the Federation's increasing influence in the Senate, as well as the growing power of Hego Damask and Damask Holdings. Kim grills Sidious on where he stands on the Trade Federation, but Sidious remains tactfully neutral. Their meeting is then interrupted with news that Kim's family has died in a crash, only leaving his son, Jedi Ronhar Kim, as a lone survivor. Later, he meets with Ars Varuna, who is troubled at Kim's staunch stance against the legislation the Naboo monarchy and Damask Holdings are pushing for. He wishes to avoid jeopardizing relations with the Trade Federation and its considerable economic might. Sidious, however, pushes Varuna to vote against the Trade Federation, claiming it will portray Naboo as standing up to the mega conglomerates while actually hoping to further stoke the brewing conflict. Meanwhile, it is revealed that Plagueis has been continuing his studies on the Force-resistant Yin Chori, who provided him with specimens in exchange for him gaining them a Senate seat. Now, after 2 years, Plagueis has been able to break that resistance in one of his captives and has reached several breakthroughs. Despite a low midi-chlorian count, the Yin Chor was able to create a protective force bubble of sorts. This sort of immunity appears to be almost involuntary, and Plagueis also draws a larger extrapolation to the nature of the galaxy. He believes the supremacy of the Jedi inadvertently created a bubble of the light side around the galaxy, which Tenebrous' master temporarily ruptured in a small area. More importantly, it continues to highlight the importance of midi-chlorians and their evolution with regards to the Sith and the Jedi. The current running theory was that the Celestials, immensely powerful entities, had merged themselves with the Force eons ago and now influenced the events of the galaxy. However, the Sith doctrines dictated the Force itself must be dominated, and a true Lord of the Order would be the living embodiment of the Force. To Plagueis and the Sith, a greater leap for sentient beings could be accomplished through the study and manipulation of midi-chlorians, rather than the overthrow of the ambiguous Celestials. The Sith Lords of old had come close to crossing that bridge to immortality, but their methods had delved into tapping into dark energies rather than the inner essence of the Force, and were lost to time. That was where Plagueis' research diverged, for his manipulation of midi-chlorians, as evidenced by the changing of the Yin Chor, has broader implications than the past Sith could even imagine. For should this power be mastered, Plagueis would gain dominion over both death and life, able to influence the actions of entire populations, whole worlds and systems. He may even be able to induce the Force itself to bring forth the being of life without fertilization, an unprecedented creation. Elsewhere, Sidious explores the foreboding dark world of Dathomir, and is drawn to a mysterious Force presence. He is approached by a woman who senses him in the Force, who asks him to save her child. It is a male infant Zabrak, with a small crown of horns and his body tattooed in red and black. She asks Sidious to protect him from the Night Sister Mother Talzin, and he grudgingly agrees after sensing the infant's strength in the Force. Sometime later, Plagueis and Sidious convene once more at Sojourn, where the Damascus Holdings gathering now includes representatives from Geonosis, a Neimoidian from the Trade Federation, and San Hill, son of Larsh Hill. The Sith hope their schemes will now sow a subtle fear in the inner worlds closer to the core, causing them to ignore or even disenfranchise the outer and mid-rim. Plagueis has unseen tentacles everywhere, including a substantial amount of seats in the Republic's Senate. He believes the tide is turning in favor of the dark side, and urges Sidious to encourage Varuna to build a defense force against the Trade Federation. Sidious, however, believes it is essential that they also weaken the Jedi in conjunction with the Republic. Prideful in the strides he has made in his research, Plagueis confidently asserts an attack targeting midi-chlorians would resolve their issues. Sidious, calculating and eyeing Plagueis, suggests they manufacture the fall of the Jedi from within instead, lured into a trap they themselves created. We will have to exploit their vanity and blind obedience to the Republic. They must be made to appear enemies of peace and justice, rather than guardians. Once Sidious ascends to the position of Supreme Chancellor, there will be no possible recovery for the Jedi. Plagueis also plans for himself to be appointed as co-chancellor. Consequently, it will be important for Sidious to remain free of scandal and fall back from any of their schemes to eliminate their political enemies. Plagueis' first target for their ascension is Vidar Kim, Senator of Naboo. Sidious departs for Theed to complete his mission, but is plagued by a small conflict within him, as Kim was a childhood mentor of his. Nonetheless, the grand design of the Sith moves on, with Sidious still looking up to Plagueis as a being of immense power and wisdom. Yet Sidious now begins to wonder about Plagueis' true motives, for the assassination of Kim will be blamed on the Trade Federation, an organization they helped bring to power. Additionally, he begins to wonder if Plagueis would ever deliberately withhold knowledge from him in order to maintain the upper hand in their dynamic relationship. He meets with Kim, who now believes T'Polo and Varuna were responsible for the crash that killed his family. Kim then reveals he plans to go to the Jedi and his son Ronhar to spill the information about the deals the monarchy has with the Trade Federation. Leaving Kim's office, Sidious then meets with Plagueis' agent for the assassination, Sate Pistage. He will contract Maladian assassins, who are ordered to kill Kim after he has approached the Jedi. Meanwhile, Plagueis brings data of the Yin Chori to the cloners of Kamino, hoping to create an army of soldiers. The scientists worry the Yin Chori's natural aggression will make clones of it unpredictable and prone to lashing out, and instead suggest human subjects. The only thing that concerns Plagueis is the emotionality of humans, one of the main reasons he wishes to test Sidious more. He learns an army may be able to be made in 12 years. Elsewhere, Senator Vidar Kim is killed in an assassination, but Ronhar Kim survives. Vidar never told the Jedi his intel on Naboo, but the Senate is now rife with fear and apprehension, for it is rumored Kim had crossed a group of powerful lobbyists. Palpatine becomes the interim senator of Naboo, and as he touches down on Coruscant, he notes the myriad of vices, luxuries, and naivety to the outside galaxy rampant in the life of the social elites on the planet. He attends the funeral of Vidar Kim and looks to meet with Ronhar, as a test of his ability to conceal his force powers from the Jedi. It has also been months since he has been in contact with Plagueis. Sidious converses with Ronhar, providing a compassionate, understanding presence for the young Jedi, who is frustrated at his failure to stop the murder. He befriends Ronhar, spreading the web of the Sith into the Jedi Order itself. As for Plagueis, he is also in the company of Jedi, but on Sereno. He and his moon officers are meeting the Jedi Jocasta Nu, Sifo Dyas, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Dooku. Plagueis is particularly interested in Dooku, who is a renowned duelist and diplomat, while also a passionate critic of the Senate and current Chancellor. While he has no plans to replace Sidious at the moment, Dooku could become a viable insurance policy. The meeting itself, which regards a mundane diplomatic issue in the star system, is fruitless, and Plagueis soon finds himself alone with the Jedi. Dooku expresses his discomfort with the bickering, while Qui-Gon grills Plagueis over his support of the Trade Federation and continued unrest in the Outer Rim, and how it benefits Damascus Holdings. He leaves Plagueis with Dooku and Sifo Dyas, and the conversation turns to the leadership of the Republic. Plagueis manipulates the conversation to the subject of an army for the Republic, should the sporadic conflicts coalesce into a larger-scale war. Sifo Dyas remains confident and loyal to the Jedi and the values of the Republic, yet Plagueis still detects a note of apprehension in his words. Plagueis pushes on, feigning worry that the outer systems may militarize, and should the Jedi be sent to keep the peace, they will have no armies to fight with. He nearly proposes using the Kaminoans and their cloning services to Sifo Dyas, but a warning from the dark side cuts him off as Jocasta Nu approaches their conversation. Months later, more Trade Federation worlds are put before the Senate in a bid to acquire seats. More Jedi swarm the city than ever, and Sidious becomes convinced he and Plagueis' plan is the right way. They will never overcome the military might of the Jedi by themselves. Sidious is then approached by Ronhar Kim, Sifo Dyas, and Dooku. To his surprise, Plagueis and the executives of Damask Holdings also show up. The vote commences, with Palpatine speaking to the senators, casting doubt on the Trade Federation's intentions and abstaining from the vote. The Trade Federation wins the day, and the prospective worlds are brought into the Republic. The Sith are pleased, for these worlds will inevitably be torn between the Republic and Trade Federation, sowing more discord in the galaxy. Business continues as usual for Sidious, while Plagueis stays on Coruscant to induct Larsh Hill into the Canted Circle, a secret organization of social elites on the planet. Sidious begins studying arcane Sith texts, absent of guidance from Plagueis. He is approached by a lobbyist who takes him to dinner. However, Sidious soon senses he may be the subject of an assassination attempt, but allows himself to be detained so he can learn who the ringleader is. He is taken to the Works, a vast industrial plain of land where, forebodingly, the ceremony for the Canted Circle is also taking place. In an abandoned factory, it is revealed that Pax's team is behind the abduction. A hollow of the senator appears before Sidious, accusing Higo Damask of assassinating Vidar Kim. Team knows much of Sidious's rise to power, leading Sidious to resolve to eliminate any and all threats from his past. Team also seeks retribution for the assassination of Karat Santhi, blamed on Rujas Nome, though it was in actuality Plagueis' first mission as a Sith. Just then, however, Plagueis' Sun Guard burst in, killing the kidnappers and rescuing Sidious. The abduction was another elaborate test by Plagueis, who made sure Sidious's enemies saw them interact in public. He also wished to see if Sidious had become enthralled by the vices of Coruscant. Overall, Sidious's conduct was pleasing to him, but there will be more trials to come. He believes now is the time to fully introduce Sidious to his research into immortality, and returns his attention to the Canted Circle ceremony. Then, a strike of foreboding hits him through the dark side, and Larsh Hill is killed by the high official of the Canted Circle. Several hooded assassins kill the Moon executives and attack Plagueis with metal discs, which cut off a chunk of his jawbone and neck, seriously wounding him. Sidious, meanwhile, has become frustrated with his abrupt dismissal by Plagueis, as he wishes to grow more in power. Saint Pistache then arrives, informing him a team of Maladian assassins accepted a contract from the Grand Protectorate and plan to strike against Damask Holdings. Sidious immediately realizes Plagueis is at risk, and has been arrogant in his handling of matters on Coruscant. Plagueis had been so fixed on executing his own plan he neglected to consider the Grands. How, though? How could he have been so blind? Sidious and Sate take a speeder and rush back to the Works, where a badly wounded Plagueis attacks the assassins, killing several. He stuns them with a sonic boom from the Force, then breaks their necks. Plagueis then summons a force wave that atomizes the bodies of any assassins it hits. He staggers and nearly falls, but then Sidious and Sate arrive, laying waste to the rest of the killers. Plagueis, badly weakened, begins to order the Sun Guard to be recalled, but Sidious stops him, saying that he will deal with the Grand Protectorate himself. A storm of fury, Sidious strides into the Justice Building and makes his way to the upper levels. He bursts into a large room where the Grand Protectorate is holding a banquet to celebrate the sneak attack on Damask Holdings. Mercilessly, savagely, Sidious kills all the guards, politicians, servants, and their families. Last to die is Pax's team, who is burned alive as Sidious watches coldly. An investigation by the Senate and law enforcement, including the Jedi, into the killing spree at the Works and Justice building yields no concrete evidence towards the identity of the killers. A month later, Sidious visits Plagueis on Abora for the first time since their escape. There, Plagueis reveals his research into midichlorians at last to Sidious, who is genuinely floored by the power exhibited by his master. For Plagueis, stunningly, has managed to actually birth several creatures purely from the Force, not by natural conception. However, the ordeal with the Maladians badly weakened his physical body, and he now needs a transpirator to breathe. Additionally, Plagueis informs Sidious that the Force will inevitably resist their efforts to control life and death, to the point where misfortune may even strike them as retaliation. He tells him also that he will remain on Sojourn to heal, and that Son Hill will become head of the banking clan. This is an essential part of the Grand Imperative, as the banking clan will finance weapons manufacturers and an alternate economy for enemies of the Republic. However, Sidious remains apprehensive, worried the debacle in Coruscant may have jeopardized their mission and nearly blown their covers. He proposes they enlist an assassin trained in the dark side, not a true Sith Lord, but a blunt weapon trained in stealth and combat. The Zabrak infant will be raised to become this agent, training with droids and developing his powers in the dark side. Plagueis agrees, confident they are well on their way to ruling indefinitely over the galaxy. Finis Valorum is now Chancellor of the Republic, and the tenure of Sidious in the Senate now spans more than 20 years. He and Plagueis are well aware of the rampant corruption in the galaxy's government, evidence their imperative is bearing fruit. The unrest in the Outer Rim has continued to spread, and now affects the Yin-Chor system the hardest. The Yin-Chori have left the Republic in the Senate, and are attacking several neighboring worlds. They have been secretly armed by Sidious, and have already killed 2 Jedi. Valorum makes the call for paramilitary forces to install a blockade around Yin-Chor, which is met with praise and condemnation by the senators. An ongoing argument has plagued the government regarding the Trade Federation, which has been suffering losses from piracy in the Outer Rim and the attacks. Regardless, the defenseless worlds are caught between the mega-corporations and the criminals and cartels that run wild in that space. The support for a government military continues to grow, but Valorum pushes back, stating the Ruusan reformations hundreds of years ago, and that the resulting taxes to fund that force would further anger the Outer Worlds. By now, Ars Varuna has also ascended to become King of Naboo, and Sidious's influence and popularity in the Senate have considerably grown. He manages to always remain tactfully aloof in debates, understanding perspectives yet never offering concrete opinions of his own. As a result, he has supporters in both the core and Rim factions in the Senate. Additionally, the years have only strengthened Plagueis' powers in the dark side. He has shunned sleep, and devotes his days and nights into researching midichlorians. Presently, Plagueis and Sidious watch a recording of Sidious's fearsome Zabrak assassin, Darth Maul, who fights with a saber staff with 2 blades. They plan to incite the Yin-Chor to attack the Jedi Temple itself, and for the Zabrak's anger to fester to the point of boiling over. Sidious continues to wonder how his power, which has increased considerably over the years, compares to Plagueis'. It is revealed that the Jedi killed by the Yin-Chor earlier were smuggled into Coruscant by Sidious's agents, where they dumped the bodies in front of the Jedi Temple, inciting Valorum's fiery call to action. Plagueis tells Sidious to send Newt Gunray a gift and maneuver him into a position of power in the Trade Federation, and to finally reveal the presence of the Sith Lord Darth Sidious to a select few, including Gunray. Plagueis believes they are finally at the tipping point, where the dark side will reach its zenith. Even if the Jedi were to attempt to look into the future, it would be clouded and unknowable, indicative of their pride and complacency. Their attention now turns to King Ars Varuna to see whether he will be an asset or hinder their plans. Varuna begins commissioning squadrons of Naboo's starfighters and tells Sidious he plans to end Naboo's partnership with the Trade Federation. However, Sidious surprises him by relaying news that the Trade Federation has been given permission to arm its ships to fight off piracy. Additionally, the Republic will now be able to tax free trade zones, something Sidious urges Varuna to oppose. Varuna is outraged, and goes so far as to sever relations with Higo Damask and Damask Holdings as well. Meanwhile, Plagueis meditates on Sojourn, which is becoming rapidly overrun by forests. Several important advances have been made in the ethereal realm. Plagueis and Sidious have shifted the forest fully to the dark side's favor, by meditating for months to assert their sovereignty and control over the Force. No retaliation has arisen since. Additionally, in a mind-blowing display of power, Plagueis at last allowed Venomous to die, then manipulated his midichlorians to resurrect him from the dead. Stunned, Sidious watched as Venomous died again and again, only to be revived by Plagueis each time until his organs gave out, and the Bith was at last granted eternal death. Plagueis also gained the power to heal himself, mending the wounds he suffered several years ago and feeling rejuvenated. He knew eventually he would cease to age altogether. Then, in his greatest endeavor yet, 8 years ago, Plagueis attempted to bring into existence a pure Force being, not simply a mere animal. He reached out to every living being, but the Force was silent and he was seemingly unsuccessful. Nonetheless, his power has steadily increased, and Plagueis now believes the Sith are on the verge of absolute victory. Sidious now turns his attention to Darth Maul, his Zabrak assassin. Maul, after completing a mission during the Yunchori crisis, however, has grown prideful and confident in his skills. Sidious then contacts Nute Gunray, and feeling a rush of elation, tells him he is a Sith Lord. Gunray is informed that Naboo plans to backstab the Trade Federation, and to counter this, the Sith will promote him within the conglomerate. Sidious then sends Maul to the world of Dorvala, telling him it will be the key to gaining Gunray's trust in their new partnership. Plagueis meets with Jabba the Hutt, who plans to supplant Gardula the Hutt to become overseer of Tatooine. In exchange for Plagueis ending his support of Gardula, Jabba offers information on the Bando Gora assassins, which have been causing havoc in Plagueis' cartels planted in the Outer Rim. The assassins have a new leader, Komari Vosa, a former member of the Jedi Order and Padawan of Dooku. Plans are set in motion, and Sidious meets with Dooku on Coruscant. Dooku confides he wishes to leave the Jedi Order, no longer trusting in the decisions of its council and now highly disillusioned with the state of the Republic. He plans to reclaim his title of Count of Sereno, and believes the Republic must be torn down and built from the ground up again in order to be saved. Dooku then reveals to Sidious the prophecy of the Chosen One, for the Council has sensed darkness in the future, but also a prophesized Redeemer who will restore balance to the Force. Sidious then visits Rui Naberi, and encourages him to let his daughter Padme, who is only 13, run against Varuna for the monarchy of Naboo. Darth Maul, meanwhile, was successful on his mission, and dreams of testing his skills against a Jedi Master. Nute Gunray is now a part of the Directorate of the Trade Federation, and Maul returns once more to the sidelines, waiting for more action. Varuna plans to end Higo Damask once and for all, and Plagueis begins to leave Sojourn. He plans to finally join Sidious on Coruscant to help with the schemes there. Both the Sith look to continue to exploit Dooku's discontent, believing the Count may be useful in catalyzing a civil war that will be the downfall of the Jedi. Several gunships working for Varuna then attack Plagueis as he flies towards the Sun Guards, and his fortress on Sojourn is destroyed. He manages to escape with the help of Jabba the Hutt, and begins to plan revenge against the reigning king of Naboo. Sidious and Plagueis reunite as Varuna abdicates and Padme Naberi is appointed Queen of Naboo. Chancellor Valorum at this point, after several more political crises, is severely weakened to the point he doesn't even have the power to deploy the Jedi anymore. Maul is sent to deal with the Black Sun Vigos, and Plagueis plans to end Varuna himself. They then set into motion the blockade of Naboo, exercising their influence over Nute Gunray, now the de facto leader of the Trade Federation. Plagueis breaks into Varuna's estate, addressing him as Higo Damask. In a moment of pride and arrogance, he reveals his true identity of Darth Plagueis as he kills Varuna from within by manipulating his midichlorians. Meanwhile, Maul kills the Black Sun Vigos and returns to Sidious, but admits he revealed his identity as a Sith and that he answers to an unknown master. It concerns Sidious, who begins to worry if it is a sign the dark side is growing restless. Later, Plagueis and Sidious run into Sifo Dyas and pressure the Jedi further into creating a military force for the Republic. They suggest he circumvent the Council and contact the Kaminoans, who years ago were unsuccessful in creating a cloned Yinchori army for Plagueis. The plots of the Sith press on as Valorum continues to be beset on all sides except from Senator Palpatine of Naboo, who he still considers a true ally. Then, the blockade of Naboo begins. Valorum manages to send 2 Jedi to help resolve the conflict, Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi. Plagueis declares that it is time they reveal themselves, and tells Sidious to send Darth Maul to kill Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. However, the 2 Jedi manage to make it onto Naboo and take Queen Padme Amidala to Tatooine, where Maul is soon deployed. The Jedi and Queen escape Maul, and now know the Sith loom to some extent once more in the galaxy. Sidious then plans to bring her to Coruscant, hoping she will initiate a vote of no confidence in Valorum, and paving the way for him to become Supreme Chancellor. He talks more with Dooku, proposing they form a partnership to help rebuild the Republic. Sidious also learns of the discovery of Anakin Skywalker, a young boy found by Qui-Gon on Tatooine strong in the Force but with no biological father. Born some 9 years ago, this news rocks Sidious and Palpatine, who wonder if he is truly the Chosen One, but also if the Force is striking back at them for their efforts to dominate it. Nonetheless, the vote of no confidence is initiated, and Senator Palpatine, Darth Sidious in secret, is nominated to replace Chancellor Valorum. Events are moving quickly now for Plagueis, who attempts to gaze into the future but only catches glimpses of a vast war and a mysterious black cyborg. He becomes convinced Anakin Skywalker will change the course of history, and for that to be avoided, Qui-Gon Jinn must die to prevent him from being trained as a Jedi. Battles continue to rage on Naboo, and the Sith soon learn Anakin has somehow won the Boonta Eve pod race on Tatooine. Already, the boy's actions echo across the stars. Soon, Sidious's victory in the election becomes an inevitability, and Plagueis and Sidious retire to Plagueis' apartment to celebrate their great victory. At long last, a Sith Lord will become the face of power in the galaxy once more. The night drags on, with Plagueis drinking so much as Sidious practices his speech, he becomes intoxicated and falls asleep. As Sidious begins to leave, he suddenly turns and electrocutes Plagueis' transpirator with Force Lightning. For his victory in the Senate is now assured, and there are no guards on duty that night. Plagueis wakes up, but seems to not respond at all to the attack, apparently confident enough in his powers that he would survive. Sidious sends out more Force Lightning, revealing he has seen through Plagueis' subtle manipulations and shortcomings as his master. For Plagueis emotionally manipulated Sidious into killing his family, turned away from the grand imperative in a vain quest for immortality, and often relegated Sidious to a mere political intermediary while pursuing his own dominion of the dark side of the Force. Plagueis the Wise, who in his time truly was, except at the end, trusting that the rule of 2 had been superseded, and failed to realize that he would not be excused from it. Plagueis the Wise, who forged the most powerful Sith Lord the galaxy has ever known, and yet who forgot to leave a place for himself, whose pride never allowed him to question that he would no longer be needed. Plagueis begins to die as Sidious proclaims himself the Sith Ari, a prophesied Sith Lord conceived by the Force itself, who is destined to return the Sith to glory in the galaxy. Sidious has no need for a co-chancellor, and claims to have been using Plagueis all along simply so he could learn his powers. The grand imperative of the clone army and a galaxy-wide war will continue, but without Darth Plagueis, who dies having gained the power to save others, but not himself. Sidious ascends as the lone Sith Lord of the galaxy, but feels a small tinge of apprehension. Something was shading his sense of triumph, a vague awareness of a power greater than himself. Naboo defeats the Trade Federation as Sidious is formally elected as Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. He learns that Darth Maul killed Qui-Gon Jinn, but was slain after by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Additionally, the young Anakin Skywalker has already begun to show a penchant for accomplishing the impossible and extraordinary. Dooku leaves the Jedi Order and confides to Sidious, posing as Palpatine still, that he is tempted to learn the secrets of the dark side. Sidious then meets with Anakin and his Jedi Master, newly promoted Obi-Wan Kenobi. Sensing hidden emotions and anger in the young Padawan and unrivaled potential in the Force, he sees an opportunity in Anakin Skywalker. Should he fall to the dark side, it would result in the final executions of the Grand Imperative, and the Sith would at long last openly rule the galaxy.